I have found a lie that makes all the other lies look small. This lie is a game changer. This giant oversight on behalf of the Navy and the people cooking up their stories is going to be the death knell for this fake, false, fictitious story they've been putting out about what happened last June. Now, I found two lies, one of which dovetails with something that I had covered in the last video, but the second one is nothing short of a Moab. It is the mother of all bullshit. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of your time in this video, but once you see it, you'll be like, oh my god, these guys are busted. Now, in the report, Washington Navy Yard, talking about this issue, this woman was ordered to maintain the ship at a high rate of speed after the captain left the bridge, 20 to 22 knots. You need to remember this. Very, very important. Now, she's getting a bunch of crap. She's being charged with this dereliction because apparently she didn't wake the captain up every 5 minutes, tell him that they were in range of a ship, another ship, and another ship, over and over and over again. But there's something strange about this, because it says here, and let me see if I can bring up the proper tab. Kopic testified that she had been instructed by the commanding officer to maintain 20 knots, even as the ship traversed heavily trafficked waters, and its main navigation radar stopped working fully about an hour before the collision. About an hour before the collision, 0030 hours, collision at 0130 hours, no radar. But the report says something very different. Here's 0033 hours. So before this, they had radar. After it, they didn't. 0034. 4 vessels passed down the left side, CPA 1,500 yards. The commanding officer was informed. That means he was awake at 0034 hours. The only way you inform a commanding officer of something is if he's awake, conscious. Not happy maybe, but awake and conscious. No course speed determinations were made. Radar contact on them was not held. Now I know somebody's saying, well, they said about an hour. Okay, about an hour. We'll say that maybe the radar was still working here. But let's go down here farther. Now you have to assume by 30 minutes, they, based on the testimony that no one is disputing of this Lieutenant Junior Grade Kopic, that at this point the radar was not working. Remained on course 190 at 20 knots. Please remember that. 20 knots. No report made to the commanding officer. Here's where it gets odd. 110. Watchstanders unsuccessfully attempt to initiate a radar track. At 110. Well, that would then make sense. Okay, the radar's not working, right? 117. Fitzgerald, officer of the deck, plotted a radar track on a vessel thought to be Crystal. Now, my understanding is there was 2 different radars. One that quit working and then one that was set to this long pulse that they would not have been able to do this with anyway. So what radar is being used here that's working? And this is what we were talking about, this argument between the junior officer of the deck and the officer of the deck, about the junior officer of the deck's visual versus the officer of the deck's radar track. Now, here's where things get into the realm of complete and total, undeniable. I don't care if you're a naysayer. I don't care who you are. You're never going to be able to answer this next issue. Now, 0129, bosun mate of the watch, a more senior supervisor on the bridge, took over the helm and executed this order that apparently was given to make hard to port. Okay, so 1 minute before, okay, they were attempting to get out of the way of this thing. Remember, they're moving at 20 knots. 20 knots is roughly 20 miles an hour. At that rate, you are moving 1 mile. You are moving 1/3 of a mile every minute. A mile every 3 minutes. So you are moving 1/3 of a mile every minute at 20 knots. 1/3 of a mile is it's between 500 and 600 yards. We'll just say 500 yards. That's 1,500 feet at 20 knots. Are you still with me? 1 minute at 20 knots is 1/3 of a mile. Now, let's go to this. The sailors who were manning the combat nerve center of the USS Fitzgerald did not know they were on a collision course with a ship almost 3 times their size until about 1 minute before impact. Remember what 1 minute equals at 20 knots? 1/3 of a mile? Let's see. 1,700 yards. That would be 580 yards in a minute. 1,700 feet. The ship is only 600 feet long. So in that minute, 3 ship lengths at 20 knots. Now explain this. Then shortly after crossing into a busy shipping channel, the merchant ship ACX Crystal popped up on the CIC's commercial ship AIS system dangerously close to Fitzgerald. The container ship was bearing down on the warship. Now remember, this is sworn testimony. Bow pointed toward the middle of the warship. Woodley ordered the camera used to spot targets for the ship's 5-inch gun toward the bearing of the Crystal. Fire controlman, 2nd Class Ashton Cato, who manned the camera, saw the flared bow of the ship fill up his monitor just seconds before the fatal crash. Bullshit. There is no way from that camera angle they would have seen the bow of the Crystal that was moving at 14 knots itself aimed toward the center of the Fitzgerald. If the Fitzgerald was moving at 20 knots, the bow of the Crystal would have been aimed off the bow of the Fitz. If it had been aimed at the center of the ship 1 minute prior, it would have never hit it. At 1 minute out at 20 knots. Would have never happened. When you think about this, this makes sense. The only way, at 1 minute out, if that bow of the Crystal was aimed at the Fitzgerald was dead in the water. The only way, if 1 minute out, that bow of the Crystal was aimed at the Fitzgerald and a minute later hit the Fitzgerald in the center of the ship, the Fitzgerald wasn't moving. That's the only way this is true. Either the report is lying and they were dead in the water, or these guys here are lying about what they saw on the camera. I even brought up this track to show you. Now remember, allegedly the Fitzgerald is up here, coming down here. There's no way. Now this is 1628.57. This is roughly about 90 seconds-ish before the collision. The Fitz is up here. There's no way that 5-inch gun camera would be looking at the bow of the ACX crystal pointed at the center. If they were looking at the bow of the ACX crystal, they would have seen it off their bow, not looking directly starboard. And I know a lot of you are like, oh shit, that's exactly right. The only freaking way that story from those two in the CIC would be true is if the Fitz is sitting out here dead in the water. And we've made this allegation from the beginning. Looking at that damage. Let's see if I can pick up a good picture of it here. No scraping. This ship wasn't moving at 20 knots when it got hit. This ship was sitting dead in the water. And that merchant vessel took a bead on it and slammed into it, tried to sink it. This is what we said from day one, and now we have testimony from two people who were in the CIC based on the description of what they said they saw from that camera that would agree with that assessment. I'm sure the comments in this one are going to be interesting. Like, share, subscribe.